We have the honor and the privilege of promoting a product that is perfect. We have a real product coming direct from our farms to our consumers that is good for them, that's always going to be good for them.
Welcome to the Hoard's Dairyman podcast. Today's guest has more than a few irons in the fire, just like all dairy farmers. She has milked cows her whole life in the unglaciated or driftless region of Wisconsin. Her dairy farm is home to both Jerseys and Holsteins, located just a few miles outside of Viroqua. And she grew up with registered Holsteins and was very active in the Wisconsin Junior Holstein Association. Not only is she a dairy farmer, she is a farm evaluator with Westby Cooperative Creamery, has a direct-to-consumer store, and she and her husband are raising a family on their farm. We welcome Gail Klinkner to the podcast today of Pine Prairie Jerseys and Klinkner Holsteins. She and her husband Rob and their 5 children dairy in the western rolling hills of Wisconsin. Gail, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this with you and chat through some things.
This is great. So if you don't mind, can you share your background and a bit more about your farm, your family, and what led you to where you are today?
Sure. So I grew up near Westby on a registered Holstein farm, like you said. I'm a 4th generation dairy farmer, following in footsteps of both my mom and my dad's side of the family. My husband Rob and I got married in 2003, and we actually started farming the year before that on a rental agreement. My husband is a Jersey guy, and I'm a Holstein girl. So we put those two together and started from really zero. He did not grow up on a dairy farm, and obviously I did. But if I'm honest, he's the push behind why we dairy farm. I wouldn't have it any other way, of course, and I love my cows and all the things. But he back then was the driver of he wanted to dairy farm, and as so many kids at that age, that 19, 20, 21 years old, what do you want to do? I don't know. I've always dairy farmed. There were so many other things that I considered. But of course, here we are dairy farming, and have since then, again, started with a rental agreement where the barn and all the feed was provided, and we bought the cows and the protein and the electricity and the vet bill and all the things. And we did that the first few years to kind of get our feet underneath us. I brought a handful of Holsteins with me. And when I say a handful, truly, I think it was 5 or 6 cows, calves, and heifers, all of them. And in 2006, we bought our current dairy where we live just south of Viroqua. At that time, it was still cheaper to buy your feed than it was to make it. And we all know that times have changed and economies have changed. And in 2020, we actually purchased another farm and began raising all of our own feed, with the exception of some dry hay that we try to source some really high quality for the cows, of course. We do have 5 kids, and that keeps us busy. And we have the Klinkner Country Store, which is our direct-to-consumer meat sales. We sell farm fresh beef, pork, and lamb, all raised here on the farm. And my kids are heavily involved in that as well. And I think that's just a great thing for them to learn money and how to talk to consumers. And hopefully, as they're now starting to grow up, and a few of them are adults now, gives them a real opportunity to be able to speak to our consumers going forward too.
Great. How old are your kids?
The oldest is 20 and the youngest is 8. So we do have a little bit of a range in between, but it's an interesting thing to parent adults versus an 8-year-old too.
Oh, that's great. And there's no better place than growing up on a farm. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners who are outside of the upper Midwest, can you tell us about the terrain of Vernon County and the driftless zone of Wisconsin and what it's like to farm on the rolling hills?
It's just that the rolling hills. We do have a few places on our farm that I don't think anybody wants to drive a tractor on, including me. Um, but yeah, very rolly and ditches and gullies and all the things. Our farm is ridgetop, which is great, but then you have to think about runoff and conservation. And actually, when we bought our other farm, we dove into the conservation part of it and became involved with the Tanner Creek Watershed, which is our local watershed group here. And I'm sure many of listeners from Wisconsin understand the terminology of watershed. And I know it's throughout the country, but I know in Wisconsin there's a lot of conversation about watersheds. And we did some grant work and actually put in a dam, to slow down some water runoff. We do double cropping. So we do sorghum during the summer, and then we go back with either rye or triticale, in the fall, and hopefully conserve our topsoil and keep it all where it belongs, and work really hard to make sure what we're putting for nutrients on the ground stays where we put it. And then did a lot of pasturing and put in some pasturing fence, for our young stock and our dry cows, and, let the land work for us, but also take care of that land and our water systems.
Yeah, for listeners listening, you're in the Mississippi River watershed as well. And that's obviously a big reason why it's unglaciated in that part of the state. And it's just a big difference between the geographies of Wisconsin for those who don't know that it really is rolling.
It is. And kind of interesting, I guess, I think, is we are only 20 minutes from the Mississippi River, right? And our farm is on the east side of the highway, and our neighbor on the west, his water ends up in the Mississippi. Ours actually starts in the Tanner Creek at the very beginning of the Tanner Creek and will flow to the Kickapoo and the Wisconsin and then to Mississippi. So it's interesting how just, the difference of the road really, or the topography indicates where our water goes, and it all gets to the Mississippi, but a roundabout way.
That's great. That's really interesting. So you mentioned you started a country store right in the middle of the pandemic, it sounds like, in 2020. Can you tell us what led to that decision?
Yeah, so we actually live on a state highway. And we've talked for years, how do we get consumers on the farm? Not everybody has the pleasure of growing up on a dairy and understanding the dairy industry and just where our food comes from. And we live near Viroqua, which is very rural. Vernon County is very rural in general. Until a couple years ago, we only had 2 stoplights in the whole county. But we still felt like we had neighbors and friends that needed to be able to come out to the farm. And we've always said the barn door is open. We have nothing to hide, as so many of our dairy farmers have. But we really wanted to invite people out. So the process of starting the Klinkner Country Store kind of went around and about different ways. We've always wanted to do ice cream. And as of today, we're still not doing ice cream because there's so much logistics to that. But in 2020, when the whole world was wondering, what do we do next? And how do we make sure everybody has food? We had a granary on our farm that really had been a catch-all for about 15 years. And if it was in there, chances are we didn't need it. And we decided, hey, let's clean that out and see what we can do to fix it up. And I specifically remember my father-in-law coming out because we're like, hey, we've got an idea. Would you help us? And he looked in the door and he looked at the stuff inside and said, yeah, let me know when you get that cleaned out. And we called him back 2 days later and he said, really, it's clean? And we went through and renovated it, and really we didn't change much. That's part of the fun of it, is we wanted it to look like a granary, and so people could have that little piece of history. We had to structurally fix a few things, and the original wood floors are in it, the original beams. The inside of it is actually the outside that was on it. We went and put tin on it, obviously just to make it a little newer and nicer, but the inside is the old wood siding that was on the outside and now is in the inside, again, for history. Um, and we worked with some local processors to, get some beef in the store right away. And then as we went through and raised our pigs and our lambs and incorporated them in as we went. And it's been a great thing. During COVID, it was the opportunity for people to come out, and somewhere they didn't have to worry about if they were, if they had to wear a mask or not. We just kind of took that one day at a time. And as we went through that process of renovating and starting, the kids were there for every part of it. And you know what? We had time then. So many times in this world, the way it is, and everything's fast, and I feel like we're sped back up again now. We had the opportunity to have the kids home, and they all have some blood, sweat, and probably tears involved in starting the store, and they all have a good understanding now.
That's fantastic. You're 5 years in, essentially now, a little past 5 years. What have been your biggest surprises, learnings, any highs or lows that you'd want to share with us? Or maybe those that are considering doing something like this?
Right. So it took a while to kind of build that clientele, right? The people that knew where we were, and we're not that far. We're only 6 miles from Viroqua. But people just to understand where we were location wise, and then what our hours were. And Facebook was really where I started my advertising, still where I do a lot of it. The local Facebook groups. And I should probably back up and say before we actually opened the store, I had started that cow prices were actually quite low at that point, and we had started doing hamburgers. So, if we had a younger cow that, just wasn't meeting the criteria to stay in the herd any longer, I had started doing direct to consumer hamburger. So it was, I have an animal we're going to butcher, and if you would like hamburger, I'll meet you on such and such day, in the towns on the way home. And I would say 9 times out of 10, I'd come home with maybe a cooler full of hamburger that I was going to put in my own freezer anyway. So we kind of had a little bit of a base, I guess I'd say, when we started. And when we started the store, then we just in turn licensed and now can sell direct. But I would say check with your local regulations and make sure legalities you have correct. In Wisconsin, my understanding was if it went in my freezer, I couldn't sell it anymore. So, like I say, I could drop it off on the way home, but it never went in my freezer. Now we have freezers. So
the not licensed for resale is always I get the USDA certification, and it's a interesting dynamic trying to figure out, navigate those waters, isn't it?
yes, and I guess now after I've been through it and I do it and we're inspected once a year, just like on the dairy, I understand it, and it's very a simple process. It's just making sure you're rotating your stock, and that you have labeling correct. And at the end of the day, we all want to take care of the consumer, and we want to make sure that the consumer has a safe product, whether it's in the dairy world or the beef world. Let's take care of them.
So I did some homework on your Facebook page, which, like you said, you've done a really fantastic job on your store Facebook page. And I saw you have a summer night on the farm. Can you tell us a bit about what that is and where that originated, and kind of a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the brainchild of why do we want to have the store? Again, to invite customers out to the store, give them the hands-on experience. So as we talked those first couple of years, it's, well, let's do something to get people out here, give them a reason to come out. So our summer nights on the farm are free. I do generally find at least a food truck or maybe a food and a beverage truck to come out to the farm, and then some local crafters, because it's all about community, right? We all work together to make the community more exciting, and we want them to come out during chore time, again, with the barn doors always open mentality. So that first one, I specifically remember my daughter, and she would have been 8 or 9 at the time. She was having so much fun with all these vendors here, probably a dozen that first time in a food truck, and all the kids and the community members that again, COVID time, right? Looking for something to do, and it was free. And she didn't want to go feed calves, and that was her job. And I said, Ruby, go fill your calf bottles, and I promise it will be fun. And 10 minutes later, I looked out of my store door that overlooks the barn, and here came Ruby and I don't know if we had 10 or 12 calves at the time, and 10 or 12 kids, each carrying a calf bottle, following her to the calf barn. And that's one of my favorite memories of this store is we gave those kids the opportunity to do something they're probably never going to get to do again, or at least don't have that opportunity on the regular. And when we did that, we, hopefully gave them a little bit of the love of the dairy cow that we have, and gave them the opportunity to understand a little bit more. And then I'd also say one of the other highlights is our cows go in and out every day. We have a stall barn. When we put the cows in, we open the gate, and in about 3 or 4 minutes, every cow is in their stall, the same stall that has their name above it, every single day. And excuse me, people love to see that interaction, with us and the cows. They know where they belong, and they want to be there. And I really enjoy that part of it.
You mentioned ice cream as something you want to do. So tell me about the future of your store. And I have a new appreciation from hearing a panel talking about on farm processing, how complicated it is to get started. So, can you tell us kind of your future direction and what your hopes and dreams are for the store?
Yeah, so we still have the hope and dream to have ice cream. Whether that looks like hand dipped ice cream or processing yet is still, kind of a stepping stone. And how do we start that? First of all, we have to have the commercial stainless steel kitchen stuff, and then water. And we don't have running water in the store. It's an old granary. That wasn't a thing. So we really need to probably add on a small section for that. And we'd like to still do that. It's just, one step at a time, and make sure that, I guess I want to reinvest in the store and let that grow and change and see how that works out for us. But yes, we still intend to do ice cream. I think it'll probably start with hand dipped ice cream. And I'd really like to be able to have families come out and it not be absorbently expensive for them to be able to bring their family, have a seat on the farm, and enjoy some ice cream.
So, you already have basically 2 to 3 full-time jobs we've talked about. And let's go into another job that you have. You're a farm evaluator. So, can you tell us a little bit about that? And maybe, being a farmer and a farm evaluator, what are the things that you see and learn and apply to your own operation?
Yeah. So the farm program is, maybe I got myself in that as a volunteer in the beginning. I knew that Westby back in version 3 was working on implementing the program. And prior to shipping to Westby Cooperative, we had shipped to another processor that was in the farm program in version 1. So I had a little experience with what it was and how it worked. And I really thought, as a farmer myself, I brought a unique perspective and hopefully some empathy to my farmers, that we could talk through situations, real situations, and how do you implement this on your farm and make it seamless and identify that you're really doing all the things. And this is maybe a little extra paperwork or a few T's to cross and I's to dot, but it's really the same thing you're already doing. So I've been doing it for several years now, and at one point was a trainer with the farm program, and they've shifted the way they do that. But so I'm still very involved, still doing the farm evaluations, still going out to all the patrons of Westby and getting those evaluations done. Like I said, many of the things that each of the farmers do, we already do them. You already are recording your calvings. You're already recording when you are giving an antibiotic. You're already making sure that your down cows are properly cared for. You're probably already making sure that your calves have good colostrum. Those are some of those big consumer hotspots that the farm program sees and tries to negate risk for our industry. So it's just maybe, what is your policy? And I will say many times, especially smaller dairies, Westby has a lot of smaller dairies. It's, well, my wife and I do everything, or it's me, myself, and I that takes care of the farm, or maybe me and my kids. Okay, so let's just write it down. And really, we're looking at true emergency situations when something happens to you and the neighbor's coming over to help you do chores, or your friend is there because something happened. So I spent a lot of time talking about the farm program in those ways and just making sure it's a good, sound practice, that what they're doing is correct, which 99% of the time we're already doing everything we should do correctly. And just writing it down, recording it, and which is good for any business, not just a dairy farm and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but we keep track of our financials. So why wouldn't we keep track of our animals in the same way?
Yeah, it's a really good perspective that we keep our financials straight. We just documenting what we're doing on the farm with our animal care. No, it's a really good way to look at it. So I want to shift gears again to another thing that you do. You do not leave any grass growing under your feet, as my grandma used to say. So you've served on the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin board, and you are on the National Dairy Board. So can you tell us a bit of what motivated you to run and what those roles entail?
Yeah, so I just completed 6 years on the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin board, serving on the executive committee the last few years, and I really enjoyed that experience. And when I originally ran, I really had the thought of, well, why not me? And so many of us that have grown up in the dairy industry, maybe our parents were involved as we were older. Both my mom and my dad served on previously WMMB, Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board. Now it's Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. And, we were older teenagers and probably into my adulthood when my mom and dad were both on the board. And I thought, well, why not a younger perspective? And I'm not as young as I used to be, but why not? Why can't I? And I ran and I got on the board. And like I say, I served 6 years and I enjoyed that experience, and I enjoyed being able to tell my dairy farm constituents in Vernon and Crawford County, what we're doing in Wisconsin is amazing, and it drives so many sales, and it looks for the future. And I don't know how many people know that 90% of our milk in Wisconsin is made into cheese, and 90% of that cheese is sold outside of the state's borders, including exports. So that's super exciting, and that's where DFW's focus is, and that's amazing. And like you said, I do serve on the National Dairy Board. I've served 3 years now on the National Dairy Board, and when appointments eventually come out, hopefully I'll serve 3 more years. And again, having that experience in the promotion and checkoff world, truly understanding where our dairy farmer dollars go, because it is our dollars. We are supporting those programs. And when you look at the National Dairy Board, or which is part of DMI, Dairy Management Inc., you're looking at the big picture. So there's a Mayo Clinic research partnership that is going on and has been going on for several years now. And when you think about the first 1,000 days, that's from conception to the second birthday of children, all the research that we've helped develop in the importance of milk and dairy in the diet of the woman and that infant, those are all things that we're doing as dairy farmers. We're supporting that promotion, that research, and hopefully driving in to the future, our consumers understanding what's good for them, and truly making sure that everyone understands that the dairy is good. It's the key to the future.
That's fantastic. And you all do so many things. So Just if someone listening was interested in running for either one of those boards, what steps should they take and what recommendations do you have for them?
Yeah. So Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin is an election-based organization for the farmers. And you can go on wisconsindairy.org and look into the farmer board um, section, and it will tell you exactly what you need to do. So you need to go get, and I believe it's 5 signatures from farms in your area to nominate you. So you self-nominate and you find a few people to support you and you mail that in. Forgive me for the dates, but it's in March. And then the election is in May with the announcement in June of who won. Every year, a third of that board turns over or has an election. So I shouldn't say turns over, I guess, has an election. And I really want people to say, why not me? If you're wondering where your farmer dollars go to, that's your right to know where they are going and have an opinion on where they're going, and run for that board and understand what we do in Wisconsin is very cool. I think you'd all be happily surprised what our dollars are spent on and how well they're managed. Um, in Wisconsin, we talk about it's farmer dollars, and that is their first concern as the staff members spend those dollars. And then the National Dairy Board is also can be a self-nomination if you'd like to run for that board. That is in the summer, and again, every year about a third is up for re-election. And you can self-nominate, your processor can nominate you if you're on a board. I would encourage, again, people to reach out. Why not me? Why not now? Yep, it's definitely time away from the farm, but it's such valuable time away from the farm. And every time I talk about why I did promotion and why I got into these boards, it's for my kids. I want to make sure that the dairy industry is vibrant and strong, and I want them all to have the same opportunity Rob and I did. If they want to farm, I want to make sure that this industry is strong for them and viable.
Dairy promotion does a lot of amazing things. And, where the dairy world meets is World Dairy Expo, which you and I ran into each other there. And also, there was a promotion for Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin that was kicking off with a local celebrity, or maybe he's more than a local celebrity, Charlie Behrens and the Born to Dairy campaign. So, for our listeners who may not be aware of who Charlie Behrens is, can you explain who he is and a little bit about the campaign?
Yeah, so Charlie Behrens is a local comedian, local to Wisconsin, probably most notably known for the Manitowoc Minute, and where he really takes a real life spin on growing up in Wisconsin. And in I guess Wisconsin is known for Friday night fish fries and has a large Catholic community. And he really kind of takes a funny spin on all those things that we grew up as Wisconsinites. And kind of the ideal person to work with for Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin in the Born to Dairy campaign. So takes what we do as dairy farmers and puts a little funny spin on it. I think of the Farm MacGyver, and I hope people go back and look at his YouTube channel or his Facebook feed or Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin's Facebook feed, Wisconsin Cheese, and look at the things that he's introduced. The Farm MacGyver, somebody that hasn't thrown anything away since, 1985, and those kinds of things. The Farm Meemaw, the farm wife who takes care of her cats and her kids and her cows, and really just an exciting way to showcase our dairy farmers and the variety of dairy farmers. We're all real people, but at the heart, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're providing a good, wholesome product. And Charlie calls that out wonderfully at the end of each one of these little skits. And I may know a few people that will be appearing in the coming year, so look for that to continue throughout 2026, and an amazing partnership with Charlie Behrens and Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin, and a great way to just call out our dairy farmers in the state.
That's great. Yeah, Charlie must have multi-millions of followers. I'm not sure how many followers he has. I didn't research that before we recorded today, but what a great way to get the story of Wisconsin dairy farms out to his followers as well. So it's a cross-functional campaign from that perspective.
Absolutely. And he um, is happy to talk with anybody and everybody. If you ever met him, he's the most down to earth guy there is. And he really just does have a heart in Wisconsin and for the dairy farmers. And um, he's just an exciting guy and a good guy to work with. And I will have the caveat of, people probably sit back and say, and I think of some dairy farmers that would say, well, I wonder what that cost us. And I would say, just keep in mind that it's not all about dollars. Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin is really good at leveraging our money, our farmer dollars, and has a exceptional return on investment. And I'm sure this partnership is good for everybody.
That's great. That was very great. And just at World Dairy Expo, his line of people waiting to meet him, for those that have been or haven't been to World Dairy Expo, it was very, very long. And those that have been, it extended well past the globe and wrapped around the beginning of the Coliseum. So, he has an exceptional fan base. And I think really that's probably what the goal was to combine, the message of DFW and what Charlie can bring to that.
And I would say young and old. The age demographic is widespread. I have teenage kids that are like, that is so cool. But also talking to my father-in-law, and he was like, really? That's who it was? So I think that's cool that it's, far reaching.
Yes, exactly. That's a good point. I did get a selfie with Charlie myself, and I did send it to my extended family, which were same response. Very excited, very jealous. He is, and I got to shake his hand, so that was a little bit exciting for me for World Dairy Expo this year. But yeah, that was really
Absolutely.
fun.
And you can go creep on my Facebook page and listen to my 8-year-old talk to him. So it was great.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that campaign you said will run through 2026?
Yes. All the way through. I believe there's a new video every couple weeks all year long.
Right. So people can be visiting the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin Facebook page and watch for all of that to continue on.
Right. And I guess I would also add, when you talk about promotion, many, many times, especially in the state of Wisconsin, I will have farmers say, well, what are we doing? I don't see ads on TV. I don't see, the promotion here. You have to stop and think about, we don't need to be advertised in Wisconsin how good our product is, right? We make exceptional cheese, the most award-winning cheese right here in Wisconsin, and we're all cheese lovers right here in Wisconsin. So we spend a lot of those promotion dollars outside of the state's borders. But I feel like the Charlie Barons and the Born to Dairy campaign is such a good crossover where we're shouting from the rooftops across the country how cool our dairy farmers are and how diverse our dairy farmers are and what an awesome product we have. But we're also right here in Wisconsin, saying, look what we do, and hopefully talking to our friends and neighbors and communities about the uniqueness that each dairy farmer and dairy farm family brings to the table as well.
So, to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to do some more fun questions. So, we've talked about all of the things that you do, and you are incredibly busy. So, for our listeners, do you have any time management tips, and how do you balance all of the things that you do?
My phone calendar is my life. If you ask me what I'm going to do if I don't look on that calendar, it probably isn't going to happen. I have had a phone crash, so now I'm connected on the cloud. So I would say make sure you do the cloud. And at that point, I was so upset about my time management that I went back to paper for a while. So I carried a calendar. But really, I have a super supportive family and husband that helps make sure I get all the things done. I won't tell you I'm a housekeeper. I am a cook, but I'm not a housekeeper. So we live here, I always say, when somebody comes by. um, but I do enjoy spreading the good word of the dairy farm. I'm very involved in the youth in the county. I'm part of the Vernon County Dairy Youth Committee and the advisor for our junior dairy club. And again, I guess that leads back to that is my goal in being part of promotion. It's for my kids, and I want to make sure they had the experiences you and I both had, Kylene, as young junior Holstein members and opportunities. And here in Vernon County, we're doing a lot for the kids. We do several activities throughout the year, and I don't know the number, 10 or 12 different activities. So that, you space that through the year, and about once a month, we're getting the kids together and doing something with them. But again, back to my calendar on my phone, and time management, I do work. So to make those things all pan out is on my calendar.
Living life through your calendar. I definitely understand that too. So, well, you kind of touched on this, but what makes you most excited about the future for dairy and the future of dairy promotion? All of those things.
I would say the number one thing is we have the honor and the privilege of promoting a product that is perfect. That it's good for people. We're not going to have the conversation of all the things, the additives. We have a real product coming direct from our farms to our consumers that is good for them, that's always going to be good for them. That makes me excited. The excitement in the youth is rivals the excitement you and I had as young people. The excitement you see in the show ring when kids are showing, and the pride in their animals, and the understanding of why their animal is good or what they can do to improve. I have 5 kids, and I would be surprised if they're not all involved in the dairy industry in their adulthood. The oldest 2 are very much involved now, and our youngest is 8, and I would say I joke he runs the farm, but it's not much of a joke. He tells everybody what needs to be done when, and he's right there in it too. So the future is exciting for me, and how we make sure they continue to be involved and have the opportunity to create a perfect product.
Fantastic. I think that's part of survival as being the youngest. My youngest acts a lot the same way, so I understand. All right, we've talked a lot about dairy products. What's your favorite dairy product?
Ooh. So I used to joke with farmers when I first got on the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin board that I like cheese, and I already knew that. But it turns out I'm not just like a mild cheddar and mozzarella fan. I kind of like all cheeses. I just wasn't exposed to all of them. But really the Sartori's Bellavitano Merlot cheese is like my favorite. I actually took some to work yesterday just to share because I like to share all those good, exciting cheeses. And I feel like I'm not probably the only one that didn't know there is over 600 varieties of cheese in Wisconsin.
Yes, cheese is pretty hard to beat. So great. We've, as you said, we shared a background in Junior Holstein. What's your favorite cow of all time? It doesn't have to be your favorite that you owned, but of all time, favorite cow.
At the end of the day, mine, they're mine and they have a personality to match. My favorite cow, I actually have my senior pictures with, and she was my first 4-H calf. And her name was Gypsy, and my picture along with hers still hangs on my wall today. And she was an excellent Holstein cow, and she had a personality, and God bless my mom and dad because they did everything and anything for that cow. She actually passed away while the vet was there working on her. So she really did have a life of luxury.
Gail, thank you for joining us today, and we really appreciate the time that you took to give us a peek into your very busy life.
Absolutely.
So you've been listening to Gail Klinkner, dairy farmer from Wisconsin and member of the National Dairy Board. If you want to be the first to catch these conversations, make sure you're following us on YouTube or your favorite podcast player so you don't miss a beat. And if this episode added value for you, send it to someone who'd appreciate it too.
Thank you for listening to the Hoard's Dairyman podcast. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. See you next time.